The old post office on Blackthorn Lane had been closed for nearly 30 years, yet every resident of Wexford Hollow still referred to it as though it might reopen any day, as if time had merely paused behind its peeling red doors. Eleanor Briggs remembered when it had been the heart of the village, when Mrs. Dalloway sorted letters with brisk precision, and Mr. Arthur Hensley stamped envelopes with rhythmic finality. But now it crouched at the edge of the moor like something forgotten and faintly ashamed, its windows clouded, its sign creaking softly even when there was no wind. And it was precisely this quiet persistence that drew Thomas Whittaker to it one bleak November evening, compelled not by curiosity alone, but by the strange letters he had begun receiving, letters addressed in his own handwriting, postmarked from that very post office, and bearing no message inside, only the faint scent of damp paper and something older, something like earth long undisturbed. Thomas had shown them to his sister Margaret, who insisted it was a prank perhaps by the village boys, yet there had been a tremor in her voice when she noticed the dates stamped on the envelopes, dates from decades past, long before Thomas had been born. And so he found himself standing before the building as dusk bled into night, the fog creeping low across the ground, curling around his ankles like a living thing, the iron gate half open as though an invitation, and despite the warning murmurs of memory, stories whispered by children of lights flickering within, of footsteps echoing after midnight, he stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and silence, yet beneath it lingered a faint, rhythmic tapping, like the distant echo of a stamping machine still at work. And as his eyes adjusted, he saw the counters exactly as they must have been left, ledgers open, inkpots dried, a calendar on the wall still turned to October 1973, and there behind the counter stood a figure motionless, its back turned, clad in the faded uniform of a postal clerk, and Thomas called out, his voice catching slightly as it echoed too loudly in the stillness. But the figure did not respond, only continued its slow, deliberate motion, sorting letters into neat piles, though Thomas could not see from where they came, and with each movement came that same soft, hollow tapping sound, as though something were being stamped again and again. He took a cautious step forward, then another until the floorboards creaked beneath him, and the figure paused, its head tilting slightly, as if listening, before turning ever so slowly to face him, revealing not a face but a blankness, a pale, featureless void where eyes and mouth should have been. And yet Thomas felt unmistakably that it was looking directly at him, recognizing him, and in that moment the piles of letters on the counter shifted, sliding toward him as if guided by unseen hands, spilling across the surface and onto the floor, each envelope bearing his name, his address, written in that same familiar script. Panic surged through him and he stumbled back, knocking into a shelf that rattled violently, dislodging more letters that fluttered down like dead leaves. And as they fell, the room seemed to change, the walls darkening, the air growing colder, the faint tapping sound growing louder, faster, until it became a relentless pounding that reverberated through his skull. And suddenly the door behind him slammed shut with a force that made him cry out, the handle refusing to budge when he grasped it, as though something on the other side held it firmly in place. Margaret had told him to leave it alone, he thought wildly, to burn the letters, to forget. But now the past had closed around him. And as he turned back toward the counter, the figure had moved closer, standing now just a few feet away, its blank face tilting again, and though it had no mouth, he heard a voice, soft and distorted, as if spoken through layers of paper, asking, "Why did you not reply?" And Thomas shook his head, unable to form words, because he had never received any message, only emptiness, only silence, and yet the figure seemed to tremble with something like disappointment, its hands, if they could be called hands, lifting one final envelope from the counter and extending it toward him. With shaking fingers he took it, the paper cold and damp, and as he opened it, expecting once more the hollow nothingness he had come to dread, he instead found a single sheet within, covered in writing so dense it seemed almost alive, shifting slightly as he tried to focus. And though he could not read every word, one sentence burned itself into his mind with terrible clarity. Undelivered souls must remain until acknowledged. And before he could react, the letters scattered across the room began to stir, lifting from the floor in a slow, swirling motion, encircling him, brushing against his skin with a whispering sound that grew into a chorus of voices, each murmuring fragments of messages never received, never answered, and among them he began to hear his own voice, calling out in confusion, in fear, echoing from somewhere distant yet impossibly close, and the figure stepped forward once more, reaching out, and this time when it touched him, there was no physical sensation, only a sudden, overwhelming pull, as though his very presence were being drawn out of him, unraveled like a thread from fabric. And the last thing he saw before everything dissolved into darkness was the counter, now neatly arranged once more, the letters stacked in perfect order. Waiting. The next morning, Margaret found the old post office door standing slightly ajar, the fog already lifting with the pale light of dawn. And though she called for her brother, there was no answer, only the faint, lingering scent of damp paper. And on the counter inside lay a single envelope addressed to her in Thomas's unmistakable handwriting. The postmark dated decades into the future, and when she opened it with trembling hands, she found nothing inside at all, only the chilling certainty that somewhere beyond reach a reply was still expected, and that until it came, the post office would never truly close, the mysterious haunted post office.